So I love this notion that we ought to have an equal balance. I heard that conversation 5 years ago, I heard that conversation 10 years ago, and I heard that conversation when I first started, in industry. Oh, we need more kind of women in leadership positions. And I just sit and think, gosh, 20 years later, and here I am reflecting and having the same conversation with you again.
Yeah, I think, when you read about it, there's lots of excuses made around, women not wanting to make the choices, but actually I would say a lot of it's down to those hiring managers or, the executive recruiters. Are they being incentivised to ensure that there is that gender parity, or are they just picking from, the club of people that they know?
I think the research shows that's exactly it, Andy, because just look at those wonderful top 10 excuses for why there aren't enough women on boards. And, my favourite one was because we've got one woman. So, that's our job done.
When I think of CEOs of organisations that I look up to, you've got Carolyn McCall at ITV and then Sasha Romanovich at Grant Thornton. Now, I guess from your perspective, what's different either in those organisations or with those women that have enabled them, to get to sort of the top, I guess, from the research perspective, because those organisations are absolutely thriving.
What's really interesting and distinctive, which is backed up by the researchers, is the values that they hold and how true they stay to those values. And I do think women bring a richness and a diversity of thinking. I think they have a skill set that is much needed, in current business climates, like emotional intelligence. And every time I talk about emotional intelligence, people say, oh yeah, women are more emotional. Well, that's not emotionally intelligent. Emotionally intelligent means that they have the capacity to do something called collective leadership, draw others in, have innovative thinking, while still being able to manage, the harder things, like the books and the finances. And the research has proven that time and time and time again.
Also, when it comes to things like sort of children taking shared parental leave, how many organisations actually, there's a process for it, but how many organisations are really pushing it in there, sort of to say to their men, well, have you thought about taking shared parental leave? If you've been off for 6 months, and you then start to understand actually organisations move on. You look at innovation and the way that companies are moving. 6 months is a huge amount of time in the world of work. And I just think, will we see a change if more organisations actually start to ask people to do that?
If I was shaping and designing, the future, I would be saying things like compliance with legislation are really critical and important because that manages the governance. But if you want imagination and flair and institutional change, then we have to change perception, we have to change mindsets.
Absolutely. I think, there's that place to disrupt in the workplace, but also this is about society as well. And, it's 100 years sort of since women got the vote. And I think the last thing we need is to be in 10 years' time sort of looking and saying, well, it's still 7% and there's still more Daves or Stevens as CEOs than there are women.
Walking the talk, I think is absolutely essential. And then, it's my 3 Ps really. If you're going to make a difference, you have to be passionate about this agenda. You have to be persuasive, but most of all, you've got to be kind of persistent, because without that persistence, I guess it's just all too easy to give up, or like those top 10 excuses, is to say, our board doesn't need it, women don't want it, and we've just got one. That's just not good enough.